Welcome to the Trailblazers podcast, where we chat with women who are trailblazing in business in their own unique ways, their journeys, and their missions. I'm your host, Disha Solanki, and our guest today is a truly inspirational woman. She founded Liquid in 2004 in a room above her mother's garage with a phone, a laptop, and a toddler, and a 5-month-old baby with no clients. Today, the company is 20 years old and works across 25 jurisdictions and 19 time zones. With its headquarters in Birmingham in the UK and an office in Brisbane, Australia, Liquid is an integrated communications agency working across marketing, PR, social, digital, performance marketing, design, and content creation. Liquid was named the best agency outside of London by PR Week in 2021 and won the Best Global Consultancy of the Year in the PRCA Platinum Awards in 2022, and was named Midlands Marketing Agency of the Year in 2023. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome Elisabeth Lewis-Jones, CEO of Liquid. How did you get from where you were then to now where you have a global agency?
It's taken a long time, and it's taken a lot of hard work, and importantly, a lot of mistakes. And I think actually the mistakes are part of your journey and part of how you learn and how you move forward. So we were very much a regional consultancy, and I went down the line of supporting our institute. So in the PR industry, it's the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, and then also the PRCA, Public Relations and Communications Association. And in 2008, I was president of the CRPR. And so I had a lot of contacts in London. And one of the things I did as president was help set up the Channel Islands group. And I eventually went across to the Channel Islands and acquired a company over there. And that helped give us that sort of understanding of working in different jurisdictions. And it was a pan-island agency in both Jersey and Guernsey, and opened a door to some incredible client names, which if we'd remained within Birmingham, we wouldn't have got. And then that kind of grew, and we got a client in North Carolina. We were doing some work for Birmingham City Council, but we did it in France for them. And I think one of the things that if you set up a business and you've got children, you are used to working at odd hours of the time, day and night, and you're used to sort of being sleep deprived. And I think when you go overseas, you end up doing the same. So actually, it was quite a good grounding for that.
How did you navigate the challenges of scaling a business internationally, which is what you have done now, while balancing the roles of being a mum and a business owner?
Oh gosh, so there's two sides to that question. The first of all is growing the business internationally. And I think often it's a good idea to take a step back and think, why do I actually want to do this? What's the point of difference for me? Because there's no point in doing something unless it's going to create that point of difference for you compared to your competitors. And also it's going to have a positive impact on your bottom line. So I think that if you go overseas, you have to think, is it because I've got a client that can take me over there? Is it because it opens up a new market? Is it because I can set up a business over there and tap into the skill set? Is it because it's got a cheaper labor force? And it's all those things that I think are really important to think about before you do it. When I went across to Australia, we had our largest client, Maple from Canada, the Quebec maple syrup producers. So we represent all Canadian maple syrup producers, both in the UK and in Australia. And they wanted us to be over there. So we kind of went, yeah, we can do that. I'd never been to Australia at that point, but it's one of those, yeah, it was just like the UK. We speak English, we drive on the left, we all play cricket, we can definitely do it. And then it's like, yes, let's work out how we're going to do this. So we were fortunate that when we went over to the Australian market, we had a client who wanted to be there. But we also had a lot of clients in the UK and in the Channel Islands who also had their own international operations. So we found that quite a few clients in the Channel Islands worked Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Malta, Gibraltar, Cayman, British Virgin Isles. And that also then went into Switzerland, Dubai, Hong Kong, New Zealand. So that sort of, that, especially on the financial clients that we had, that gave us, a wealth of international experience. And then we've also started to grow a lot of food clients that are what I would call food trade bodies, normally supported by governments, because governments want to support their own homegrown industries. And for a lot of them, we work with, for example, North Carolina sweet potatoes, and we represent them in France, Germany, and the UK. We work with the United States Dry Pea and Lentil Council, and we work for them in France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Benelux, and the UK. So it's different clients gave us opportunities. And at every point we thought, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make it work? And there's always a way to make something work.
It's very brave what you have done, I have to say, because
Oh, thank you.
a lot of business owners, and I think a lot of business women would probably feel like that was overwhelming and they wouldn't know how to do it, right? And especially because you work across so many different, not just time zone, but cultures too, in terms of how you present a marketing campaign or a PR campaign. I can only assume you would have to reinvent the wheel for every market that one client is targeting.
So I think with the internet and everything else, borders, barriers come down, the world is getting smaller. We understand cultures a lot more. We do a lot of training. So just 2 weeks ago, I had somebody in here doing cultural intelligence. So looking at how different countries behave, how there are different working styles, and how we need to do the very un-British thing. The Brits are really good. We've got 400 years worth of history of going into countries, telling people how to do it, and putting our own stamp on things. And actually to stop doing that, but to listen, to understand, to be sympathetic, to try and work with people the way their culture works. And the Department for Business and Trade are also really good at this. They have people who help you as you go into a new country, talk about sort of the differences and how things are. So when we went into Australia, Australia is so similar to the UK, but it's also so different to the UK. And they sort of said to us, beware of tall poppy syndrome. And I was like, what's this? And they said, well, if anybody comes in and they kind of put themselves over somebody else, or they're a little bit arrogant, which us Brits can be, they would just, like a tall poppy, cut you down. And it's something which, ever go over there, we always go, remember, tall poppy syndrome. We sit, we listen, we understand, and then we'll contribute. And I think that's really important.
To walk across that many cultures and lead a team across that many cultures, Liz, that's a huge testament to your leadership. How do you lead a team where you span so many different cultures, countries, and little cultural nuances too?
I think that it's one of the things we've worked really hard at Liquid is to get a really good senior leadership team. So I'm blessed in the fact that I've got a COO who is outside the industry. So he thinks about things in a very different way, and he has a very different approach to me. So that's really good. I think it's really important to listen to people with a different mindset to you. We can't all work in an echo chamber. And then I also have a senior leadership team, and the senior leadership team have been with us for years and have grown up with the company and developed. And I always say, it's part of a risk of a business as a founder. If anything happened to you, they should be able to take it over.
Yeah.
And I feel that they could take things over. And so they have worked, and we've just had our head of social, who's been out in Australia. Head of PR is about to go over to Australia for 6 weeks. So we have this constant churn of sort of understanding of where people are and what's happening. Next week, my COO, one of our account directors, is out in Turkey, in Istanbul. We've got trips planned with different team members, 2-3 lots of trips to America towards the end of the year. We've got trips to Paris and to Germany. So things are happening all the time, and people are excited. It's wonderful to work within the UK. It's wonderful to work within the Midlands. We're proud Brummies, but oh, the buzz you get from working internationally and meeting people from different cultures and learning and understanding and making a difference is just phenomenal.
Liz, how have you managed your work-life balance through your career, considering you have global reach of your business and your involvement in so many organizations too?
So I was acutely aware I didn't answer that first bit of the first question you asked, which was about sort of, children and how you juggled that. And obviously, this is very similar. And I think that when my children were really little, my mother lived just down the road. And, I set up the business in my mother's garage. In Liquid's second year, I bought an office, but I really relied heavily on my mum, especially if you're up and down to London. Because let's not forget, it was the 2000s. So Zoom hadn't really been thought of then or anything like that. We still had to turn up to meetings suited and booted. And it was a very different world. So I relied on her. If I dropped the kids off at work, she would pick them up. I always had a really good husband who would also pick up and drop off all the time as well. And I think that you just have to get organized. You also have to stop being really tough on yourself. I think as women, we are our own worst critics. And I would have to sort of say, okay, my house, there are certain rooms in my house that are a mess. My bedroom's a safe haven, my kitchen's clean, but actually the kids' playroom is a mess, their bedrooms are a mess. Who is going to know? And if I tidy it up today, it's going to be a mess tomorrow. So I might as well just leave it as a mess and stop worrying about it. And it was really hard for somebody who's incredibly house proud to have that mentality. But it was like, I need to be doing other things with this time. And instead of ironing, I would just smooth something over. Obviously, as the business grows and you become more successful, you get yourself an ironing lady. Your cleaner does more hours and all those sorts of things. But my mother was great in that respect. And actually my kids, unfortunately, she died 8 years ago, but my kids had the most amazing relationship with her, which otherwise they wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
So it's a positive in many respects. So I think accept help, have a good network around you, get organized, and stop worrying about things that, quite frankly, don't matter.
And I completely have to agree with you there, Liz. That I think I was the butt of many people's jokes at one point because I used to organize my family like it was a business at one point, because otherwise you don't know whether you're coming or going. So because I would need to know, where does everybody need to be at what time? And a bit like you, Liz, like if because my dad retired when my youngest was born, which was lovely because it meant that he got to spend time with his grandchildren that he never got to spend with us. But it also means he needs to know exactly where he's going at what time, and you have to give him like an idiot's guide to pick up and how to bring them home again, right? And then what's a priority list? Like we lived in a smaller house at that time, so at the back of our house was like a playroom. There were cars everywhere. I tripped on a few cars myself, gone flying. Maybe I've had sucked up some Lego in vacuum too, but I got to a point where I was just like, I can't bother. There's no point. And I remember a friend of mine walked in the house and she said, "Do you just leave the house like this?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I do." Because the front bit's kind of tidy and my bedroom's tidy, like you said, Liz. So I was like, they can come and they can make a mess because I think everybody needs a safe place to be. And I came to the conclusion actually that that play bit of the house was the kids' safe place to be, and they could do what they like in it as long as they knew they're going to have to tidy up at some point, because then they wouldn't play with anything, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I also think that sometimes we think that if we're going to start a business, it's going to grow and it's going to be this perfect growth graph, which goes from sort of the bottom left to the top right. But actually, we know it's a real squiggly line and all sorts of things happen for all sorts of reasons. Some in our control, some outside our control. But I was really wanted to make sure that the business grew as my children grew, because they're the overarching most important thing. So the business stayed really, really small while they were quite little. It only really started to grow as they got older, and both of them were sort of in prep school rather than pre-prep. So sort of, primary school. When my eldest son was 11, he went off and became a weekly boarder. And that also meant that I could then go across to the Channel Islands. When my youngest son went off to do weekly boarding, that's when I moved the business out of Bromsgrove in Worcestershire into the centre of Birmingham. So everything was done thinking about the children. And when my youngest son turned 18, that coincided actually with the opportunity to go across to Australia. And it's like, why wouldn't I do that now? Their need for you is so different. And I think it's really important that actually, as women in business, we have the ability to do that. Yes, we still need to pay people. We still need to keep everything going. We've got overheads. But actually, if we can work it around our children without feeling guilt, because as soon as you give birth, you feel guilt. There's something that goes on in every woman's brain that says you now have the guilt gene. And if we're at work, we feel guilty because we're not at home. And if we're at home, we feel guilty we're not at work. And that never leaves us. So we have to get over it. But we can also manage our day and our time and the growth of our businesses through the different stages our children go through.
And I do think that takes a lot of self-awareness, because most of us women want something to happen in that linear format that you said, and it needs to happen tomorrow, or it has to have happened yesterday. And to just bring it down and say that there will be a time when it will come and it will all fall into place. And I think I've come across lots of women who just give up at some point because like, oh, I haven't got where I want to be, but they have younger children, or they're not at pulls, and their responsibilities change as our lives evolve and as we change through different journeys, parts of our life too. And so I always say this is just a season in time, and this season will end, but you've got to enjoy that moment for what it is right now, because the moment will pass. And with that will have passed your memories and all of the other wonderful things that you could have accumulated along the way. And I'm finding the more women I talk to in business, that's especially when they're at the starting phase of it, they always want, I want it now, 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 and not just pace themselves. And there's a lot to be said for just pacing yourself. You don't get as stressed, you take more things in your stride. And I think the likelihood is you see much more clarity the more you pull back rather than go far quicker. Looking ahead, what are your goals for Liquid, let's say over the next 5 or 10 years? How do you envision the company evolving from where you are now?
So I feel that the company will continue to grow and continue to operate internationally and have a real sort of wealth of clients. We don't necessarily want to be the biggest, but we want to be known to be really good at what we do. So everyone jokes that it's really world domination, but actually it's about being world class. We want to make sure that whatever we do is the very best it possibly can be, whether that's creativity, client delivery, meeting targets. It's always going to be the absolute best. And we are fortunate in the fact we're quite a different company. We were the first UK consultancy, PR consultancy, to go across to the Channel Islands and have offices in both islands. We believe we are the first to have, in fact, we've got 2 chefs in the business and 2 demonstration kitchens. And obviously, we've got our global reach and our Australian office. So we're very sort of, I would say we had to be bold and brave, and we have been bold and brave. And I think we will continue to be bold and brave. I think we'll continue to work with lots of agribusinesses, international food businesses, and really grow our food offer. It's an absolute sweet spot of ours. And we know that we do that work really well. Our training is really good. The way we bring people on, the way we train them up. Even in lockdown, I'm really proud that I was so upset that all these sixth formers and students, university students, had nothing to put on their CVs or the UCAS forms. So actually we provided virtual work experience for 240 kids. And I think that's great. And I think we will continue to be a business that operates with a conscience. So every year we provide about £100,000 of pro bono PR support for a whole range of charities that are close to our heart that we work with. And again, that's something, business should be a force for good. We should act with a conscience. And we'll continue to do that too.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you're doing some really great work there, Liz. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs, especially women who want to build a business with the global footprint?
Do you know, the hardest thing I think is actually setting up is handing in your notice and leaving something safe and secure and going it alone. And, if you think about our lives, we're at school, we're at university, there's always this treadmill, and suddenly you're jumping off that treadmill and going it alone. And I think that's hard. So you just have to be brave and you just have to get on with it. And then you have to go with your gut feeling. And sometimes the biggest mistakes I've made is because I listened to too many people. And actually, I should have just gone with my gut feeling. And I still have this in my 50s thinking, oh, I'm not adult enough to do this. But actually, that's okay. Just listen to what your gut is telling you and your heart is telling you and go down that line. And I think that's really important. I'm going to contradict it slightly by saying it is also good to seek advice from professionals. So if you are going overseas, I made sure that I picked up the phone to the Department for Business and Trade. Those countries that we operate in, we have a really good relationship with the high commissions or the embassies, both in those countries and in the UK. And it's sometimes people forget that actually a lot of this set up for business is provided free of charge. And you can tap into that. And so I know enormous amounts of businesses who go overseas and they have no idea that the Department for Business and Trade is there to help them. So I think it's really important to do that. And I'm now an export champion for Department for Business and Trade, which I'm really proud of. But the help that they give is incredible.
Very helpful to know, actually, because it can be daunting to find locations to settle in overseas. I know that myself from going through that journey myself. And it's not easy to find the right contacts and the advice. And it's not easy to uncover the Department for Business and Trade and figure out how they can help you and be in touch with them. So it's great that you're an export champion. And actually, I would say you're a female export champion while you're there.
Yes, yes. And also so when we went to Australia, I contacted the Australia House and I contacted a lot of the different sort of representatives from the different states because I didn't know where we wanted to be. I knew we needed to be in Australia, but was it going to be Sydney? Was it going to be Melbourne? Was it going to be Perth or Adelaide? And it ended up being Brisbane because Queensland Trade and Investment got back to me. And they were brilliant. And they introduced me to the Brisbane Economic Development Agency. And they then introduced me to the Australian British Chamber of Commerce. And it went like that. And before you know it, you've got this incredible network. And so there are a lot of investment bodies out there who will help you set up, who will help you have an office as soon as you land on the ground, will help you in terms of what to do with HR and mobility and tax laws and setting up banks. And there is so much to be done when you go overseas. And it's really important sort of to tap into that. But yeah, Queensland Trade and Investment were amazing.
And it sounds like it's also heartwarming and it gives you that little bit more bravery when you know that there's other people and establishments vested in your interest of being successful too. Because then you have the best chances of being successful because you're not on your own in a strange territory that you're not 100% sure of. You've got a whole army, so to speak, of people who are around you to support and guide you to where you want to be.
Yes, absolutely. And what I find is that if you do go down this route and you start to talk to all these various bodies, I have been taken aback by how supportive they are. And admittedly, I can be quite good at asking for help. And it's one of those where it's a case of, I'm doing this. What should I be doing? Is there anyone you can introduce me to? And it's amazing who they come up with. And these introductions are just invaluable. But you also know that you're going to put back. So talking to the people at Brisbane Economic Development Agency, it's like, so which charities can we support here at Warwick and Brisbane? And what can we do to sort of support you?
Yeah.
And Brisbane's a really exciting city. I am so pleased that we went there. It's going to actually hold the Olympics in 2032. It's a beautiful city. It's the infrastructure, the people, the welcome they give you is amazing.
I'm so glad that it's been a successful setup for you. And it sounds like it was relatively pain-free too.
The easy thing was setting up the business. Accountants in the UK and Channel Islands, Grant Thornton, also helped us set up, because with Grant Thornton, there's an office anywhere in the world kind of thing. So they helped us set up in Australia. But to actually never underestimate the sheer amount that needs to be done and what it's like setting up overseas. So you think you know all about business and you think you understand things, and then you go overseas and you suddenly realize there's a whole load of different acronyms. Everyone kept talking about FBT and I couldn't understand it. And in the end, I was like, I'm really sorry, but what is it? And they were like, fringe benefit tax, which is essentially our P11D. So I also have this glossary of what we use and then what Australians use. And they've got a different financial year and all those sorts of things. And the same in Canada, and the same in America. There's a wealth of different quirks. The good thing about going to countries, especially within the Commonwealth, is that we have the same legal grounding and legal system, essentially, and it's also very good English. And that makes a difference.
It does, of course it does. You're speaking the same language at least, even if you have some jargon thrown in the middle of that.
Yes, yes. And I always find when you're filling in bank forms, I'm like, I don't understand what they're asking me. This is in English, isn't it? Right?
I've been there just yesterday, actually, so I can sympathise with that one.
Yes, it's tough, but I think, you just have to persevere, and it's all part of your learning. And I think that one of the most important things in life is to remain curious and always be interested and interesting. I'm chair of governors for a school, and it's one of the things I always say when they leave, the leavers the sort of service to say, always be curious. You've never be somebody who never asks questions, never sit at the back, always sit at the front, be curious, be known, be interesting.
And it'll serve them well while they're
Yes, I think it will.
Well, I encourage everyone listening to check it out, and do follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, or visit thetrailblazehers.com to stay updated on future episodes and behind the scenes content. Once again, I'm Disha Solanki with Liz, and you've been listening to the Trailblazers today. Thank you for joining us.